Captain Rhodes had always believed she was born to fly. The cockpit was her sanctuary, the hum of the engines, the soft glow of the dashboard lights, the quiet authority in her voice as she guided hundreds of lives through the clouds. At 38, she had logged over 12,000 flight hours, flown through hurricanes, mechanical failures, and chaotic emergencies, and had never once lost a passenger. But one stormy night over Kansas changed everything. It started as routine turbulence, the kind every pilot experiences and forgets by morning. But the radar lit up, a violent storm cell shifting faster than forecasted. Could see the electric veins of lightning clawing across the dark horizon. Her first officer, a young pilot named Torres, looked uneasy. "Should we call for a deviation?" he asked. Studied the radar, jaw tightening. "ATC's overloaded tonight. If we wait, that cell's going to close the corridor. We'll be trapped between two fronts." Torres hesitated. "Command won't like us changing altitude without clearance." Gave a thin smile. "Command not flying this plane, we are." And so she did what she always did, trusted her instincts. She dropped the aircraft 3,000 feet into a lower air pocket, threading it between two volatile storm systems. Passengers screamed as lightning flashed inches away from the windows. The plane shook so violently that the overhead bins burst open, sending luggage crashing into the aisles. But hands didn't waver. Her voice over the intercom was calm, unshaken. "This is your captain. Please remain seated and fasten your belts. We're in control." And they were. Minutes later, the turbulence eased. The plane stabilized. When they landed safely in Denver, the cabin erupted in applause. A few passengers even cried, smiled, exhausted but proud. She'd done her job, protected 200 people from the storm. But the applause didn't last long. By morning, a viral video was making its rounds, shaky phone footage of passengers screaming while the plane plunged through lightning. News anchors labeled it reckless piloting. One headline read, "Pilot endangers hundreds in unauthorized descent." Within 24 hours, was called into the airline's headquarters. She walked into the boardroom still in her uniform, flight bag over her shoulder, expecting a debriefing. Instead, a panel of executives stared at her like she was already guilty. "Captain Rhodes," said Director Alan Kent, his voice stiff, "we've reviewed your actions from Flight 392. You made an unsanctioned altitude change in restricted airspace." Folded her arms. "With respect, sir, I made that call to avoid a developing microburst. If I hadn't, we'd be on the news for a crash, not a storm video." Kent adjusted his glasses. "Our meteorology team says the turbulence wasn't severe enough to justify such a maneuver." She leaned forward. "Their data lagged by 5 minutes. I didn't have that luxury. I did what any responsible pilot would do." Another executive cleared her throat. "Captain, this isn't about your intentions. It's about your judgment. We can't have pilots improvising procedures mid-flight." Exhaled sharply. "Improvising, I made a decision that saved lives." Kent's voice turned cold. "You'll be grounded until further notice. Mandatory review, simulator retraining, and psychological evaluation." The words hit like turbulence to the chest. Grounded. As she walked out of the building, uniform still crisp, she could feel every eye watching her, whispering, security guards avoiding eye contact. Outside, the sunset was glowing gold against the runway. Planes were taking off in the distance, engines roaring, soaring into skies she wasn't allowed to touch. That night sat alone in her apartment, staring at her framed pilot license on the wall. She dedicated her life to flying, every sacrifice, every late night, every holiday missed. And now, one bold decision had stripped her of it all. But somewhere deep inside, she refused to believe it was over. Because Rhodes knew something no boardroom could understand, the sky had a memory. And when it called her again, she'd be ready to answer. 2 months had passed since Captain Rhodes had last stepped into a cockpit. The once busy pilot now woke to silence, no radio checks, no flight plans, no engine hum to greet her mornings. Her apartment had become a museum of flight, model airplanes on shelves, framed certificates on walls, and a flight jacket hanging untouched by the door. Her days blurred together, simulator sessions she wasn't allowed to log, calls to the airline that went unanswered, and sleepless nights replaying the storm again and again. Each replay ended the same. She survived, they lived, but she still lost. The sky had been her world. Now she was grounded, earthbound, invisible. On a gray Thursday morning, as rain traced crooked lines down her kitchen window, her phone rang. The number flashing on the screen belonged to the airline's operations desk, the one she used to call for emergency scheduling. Her pulse quickened. She hesitated before answering. "Rhodes." A man's voice came through, rushed and uncertain. "Captain Rhodes, this is Mark from scheduling. I know this is unusual, but we have a situation." Frowned. "What kind of situation?" "Flight 828 out of Dallas. The captain went down with severe food poisoning right before boarding. We've got a packed flight and no senior pilot on standby. We need someone to supervise from the jump seat, just to monitor procedures. You won't be in command." Went silent. The irony burned. The same airline that had branded her reckless was now calling her to sit quietly behind someone else's controls. "Why me?" she asked finally. "Because you're the only certified captain within driving distance," Mark admitted. "Look, this is just a temporary placement. You're not officially reinstated, but you'll be back on a plane. Think of it as observation duty." His hand trembled slightly as she pressed the phone closer. She had sworn she wouldn't crawl back to them. Yet part of her, the part that still dreamed of altitude and open skies, whispered that this might be her only chance. She looked around her apartment, the still coffee mug, the rain, the silence. She couldn't stay grounded forever. "I'll take it," she said. By noon was at Dallas, Fort Worth International Airport. The familiar smell of jet fuel filled her lungs, and for the first time in weeks, she felt alive. She walked through the terminal in civilian clothes, her old leather gloves tucked into her jacket pocket. The crew of Flight 828 was already prepping in Gate 42. The first officer, a young co-pilot named Lee, looked barely 30. His crisp uniform was neat, but his eyes betrayed nervousness. "You must be Captain Rhodes," he said, shaking her hand. "They told me you'd be supervising. I read about your storm flight." Gave a polite smile. "I bet you did." Blushed. "For what it's worth, I thought you made the right call." His words surprised her. It had been so long since anyone had said that. Inside the jet bridge, the hum of the aircraft's auxiliary power unit echoed faintly. Stepped into the cockpit and the familiar sight almost brought tears. The flight displays, the throttle levers, the smell of hydraulic oil, it all felt like home. Captain, the pilot assigned to lead, turned and grinned. "So you're the famous Storm Runner." Forced a small laugh. "I prefer Storm Dodger." He shrugged. "As long as we keep the turbulence light today." They went through pre-flight checks and quietly observed from the jump seat, nodding each step like a muscle memory awakening. The passengers boarded, the door sealed, and the engines roared to life. As they taxied toward the runway, she glanced at the sky ahead, clear, blue, harmless. But something in her gut stirred uneasily. She had learned to trust that feeling. 30 minutes after takeoff, the captain's breathing grew shallow. Noticed his hand tremble on the yoke. "Captain, are you all right?" she asked. Didn't answer. His skin had turned gray. "Look at him," she whispered urgently. Before either could react, slumped forward, hitting the throttle. The aircraft lurched. Alarms blared, the cabin jolted, and instincts, the ones that had gotten her grounded, roared back to life. She lunged forward, grabbing the yoke with both hands. "I've got control." And just like that, the grounded pilot was flying again. Only this time, 200 souls were depending on her to survive. The cockpit burst into chaos. Warning chimes echoed through the cabin as red lights flashed across the control panel. Captain's body slumped lifelessly over the throttle, forcing the aircraft into a shallow dive. Reacted before thought could even form, her hands moved like second nature, grabbing the yoke, pulling it steady. "Help me get him back," she shouted. The young co-pilot, startled, unbuckled and pulled his body backward, freeing the controls. His voice trembled. "He's out cold," no response. "Check his pulse," commanded. Press 2 fingers against neck. "He's breathing but barely." His mind sharpened to a razor edge. Training, experience, instinct all collided in a single moment. The altimeter was dropping fast. The autopilot had disengaged when collapsed. Took a breath, steadied her grip and leveled the aircraft. "Dallas Center, this is Flight 828, she said into the radio, her tone firm. "We have a medical emergency in the cockpit. The captain is unresponsive. Co-pilot and observer assuming control." The radio crackled. "Flight 828, copy emergency. Confirm who's flying." Hesitated for half a second. She wasn't officially reinstated. Technically, she wasn't even supposed to be in that seat. But there was no time for protocol, only survival. "This is Captain Rhodes," she said clearly. "I am assuming command of Flight 828. The silence on the radio lasted only a second, but it felt eternal. Then came the calm voice of air traffic control. "Copy that, Captain Rhodes. Maintain altitude and advise status." Looked at her, eyes wide. You're not even cleared to fly." His gaze stayed locked on the horizon. "Right now, clearance doesn't matter." The aircraft steadied at 34,000 feet, slicing through thin layers of cloud. Quickly scanned the systems, all stable, but turbulence warnings blinked ahead. She tapped the screen. A storm cell had developed along their route, one that hadn't been in the pre-flight briefing. Frowned, "That can't be right. Weather was clear." "Storms don't ask permission," muttered. "Change course 10 degrees east." He hesitated. "Shouldn't we call dispatch first?" "By the time they answer, we'll be in it. Turn east." Obeyed. The plane banked gently, the engines humming as they cut a new path. Behind them in the cabin, murmurs of fear rippled as passengers noticed the change in altitude and turbulence. Toggled the intercom. Her voice came out calm, practiced, the voice of a leader born in crisis. "Ladies and this is Captain Rhodes. We're experiencing some unexpected turbulence and a medical emergency in the cockpit. Please remain seated and keep your fastened. We have everything under control." As she spoke, she could feel the eyes of the crew behind the cockpit door, the flight attendants who knew her face from headlines. The reckless pilot, the one who had dived through lightning. If only they knew, she wasn't reckless, just ready. Glanced at her nervously. "You really think we can avoid the storm?" His eyes flicked between radar blips. "I don't plan to avoid it. I plan to go around the edge. We'll skirt the outer band." He nodded, still unsure. "If command finds out." She cut him off. "If command finds out, we'll both be alive to explain it." The cockpit shuddered as turbulence began to increase. The sign chimed. Gripped the console, knuckles white. "Here it comes." Kept her voice steady. "Just hold her steady. I've done this before." Shot her a sideways look. "Yeah, I read about that." "Good," she said. "Then you know how it ends." Lightning flashed ahead, illuminating a curtain of gray clouds that stretched for miles. His pulse quickened, not from fear, but from focus. This was where she belonged, where instinct and skill merged into something almost spiritual. The turbulence worsened, tossing the jet like a toy. The altimeter wavered, alarms chirping warnings about wind shear, tightened her grip, adjusting power and angle with precision. "Make sure he's secured," she said, nodding toward. "Last thing we need is him rolling into the throttle again." Fastened the captain's seat belt, his face pale but determined. "He's secure, what now?" Exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on the radar's pulsing red blotch. Now we find out if the storm's listening to me this time. As the jet plunged into the first wave of turbulence, the clouds swallowed them whole, and for the first time since she'd been grounded, Rhodes was back where she was meant to be, fighting the sky itself. The sky cracked open like a whip. Lightning flared so bright it turned the cockpit white, followed by a deafening rumble that vibrated through the fuselage. The plane lurched sideways, pitching in the grip of crosswinds that came out of nowhere. Alarms screamed their digital chorus. Braced her boots against the rudder pedals. "Counter drift 2 degrees right," she shouted over the noise, adjusted hands shaking. "It's not holding." "Then fight it." Rain smashed against the windshield in sheets. For a heartbeat, the world outside vanished. Only instruments glowed in the dark. Steadied the yoke, coaxing the jet back level. Each move was measured, almost surgical. "Dallas Center, Flight 828 declaring full emergency," she transmitted, voice steady despite the chaos. "Captain incapacitated. Request immediate vectors for nearest diversion." The radio crackled. "Flight 828, say again, Captain Rhodes." The controller's tone carried disbelief. "Yes," she snapped. "Confirming I am acting captain. We need an alternate runway." "Copy, you're cleared to Portland International. Weather advisory, severe storm cells west of your position. Recommend holding pattern." "Negative," said instantly. "We can't hold in this. We'll run out of fuel before it clears." There was a pause, then, "Understood 828, you are cleared direct to Portland. Godspeed." She switched frequencies and turned to, "Set course 290. Start descent to 31,000. Hesitated. "That storm wall if we drop into it." She met his eyes, calm but fierce. "If we don't drop, we'll lose lift. This model's not built for sustained shear at this altitude, trust me." He obeyed, and the aircraft began its slow descent into the darkness. In the cabin, passengers clung to armrests. Drinks spilled, luggage rattled overhead. A little boy cried somewhere near row 20. Flight attendants moved down the aisles, faces pale but voices calm, repeating instructions. "Stay seated, belts fastened, we're in control." Behind the cockpit door, the storm roared like an ocean. Kept stealing glances at, she looked eerily composed, her eyes scanning instruments in rhythmic motion. "You've done this before," he muttered. "Twice," she replied without looking up. "Once in training, once in reality. Both times they told me it couldn't be done." "And they grounded you for it." Gave a short, humorless laugh. "They called it excessive improvisation." The plane jolted hard, throwing against his harness. Warning lights blinked red across the console. Engine pressure fluctuation. He cursed, "Engine 2's unstable." "Throttle back 20%, ordered. Balance load to 1. He hesitated. "That'll slow us too much." "Do it." The vibration eased slightly. The aircraft steadied, though the storm kept pounding. Through the windshield, flashes of lightning revealed a wall of clouds shaped like a mountain, the storm's heart. His breath hitched. It looked hauntingly familiar, the same formation she'd faced months ago, the one that ended her career. Her voice softened. "Not again." "Heard what?" She shook her head. "Nothing, strap in." The next impact hit like a car crash. The plane dropped 1,000 feet in seconds. Overhead bins flew open, oxygen masks dangled. "Altitude loss," shouted. "I see it," wrestled the yoke, muscles burning. "Manual power, override autopilot now." He flipped the switch. The controls went heavy, every movement demanding strength. She guided the nose up inch by inch, feeling the weight of 200 lives pressing behind her. "Come on, girl," she whispered to the plane. "You can do this." Another flash lit her face, determined, unblinking. Finally, the artificial horizon steadied. The nose leveled. Exhaled shakily. "We're back." "Not yet," said. "That was the easy part." He blinked. "That was the easy part." She didn't answer. Her focus was locked ahead. The radar now displayed a massive ring of red cells, a complete enclosure. The storm wasn't just in front of them, it was surrounding them. "There's no way through," whispered. "There's always a way," replied. She scanned the pressure maps, tracing wind gradients, searching for a narrow blue sliver, an opening where air currents could carry them down safely. Her fingers moved fast, adjusting dials, recalculating altitude. "There," she said finally, pointing to a faint gap in the formation. 2 miles wide. If we dive 30 degrees, we can punch through before the cells converge." Paled, "That's suicide." "It's the same maneuver that saved my passengers last time," she said quietly. "They called it risky. I call it right." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "You're the captain." Wrapped her gloved hands around the yoke, heart pounding. "Everyone hold on." As the engines roared and the nose dipped toward the storm's mouth, the aircraft trembled, lightning flashing like camera bulbs across the clouds. This was her redemption in motion. The same reckless move that once ended her career was now their only hope to survive. And Rhodes, the grounded pilot who never stopped believing in her instincts, was about to defy the sky one more time. The storm opened before them like a black, spinning ocean. Thunder rolled beneath their wings and lightning carved crooked scars across the clouds. Rain slammed against the windshield so hard it sounded like stones. Inside the cockpit, every surface shook. Warning alarms screamed in overlapping tones, stall alerts, pressure warnings, altitude deviations. Fingers wrapped around the yoke with unbreakable focus. "Deploy speed brakes halfway. Hold the descent at 30 degrees, no more." His breathing came fast, but he obeyed. "Speed brakes set. Airspeed 430 knots and rising." "Trim it, keep it under control," she barked. The plane dived, cutting through turbulence like a blade. Her vision flickered as the G-forces pressed into her chest. Sweat rolled down her temple and her muscles trembled, but she refused to let go. Every second demanded precision, one wrong move, and the jet would break apart midair. Outside, the storm's center glowed with an eerie violet light. Had seen this before, a supercell's electric core, the most violent and unpredictable part. "Altitude 21,000 and dropping fast," shouted. "Good, we're through the shear zone. Prepare to level at 15,000. Hesitated. "That's too low for this weather." "Do it." He swallowed and nodded, adjusting the flaps. The engines howled as they descended deeper into the swirling black. Lightning struck so close it filled the cockpit with blinding white. The noise was deafening, a chaos of wind, rain, and raw energy. In the cabin, passengers cried out as the plane jolted downward. Drinks flew, strained, and overhead bins banged open. A flight attendant prayed aloud, voice shaking but steady, "Please, hold together, please." Called, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Check the radar ahead. I need confirmation of the gap." He wiped sweat from his forehead and glanced at the screen. "Gap closing. We're 5 miles out, 2 minutes, maybe less." "Then we're cutting it close," she muttered. Suddenly the aircraft lurched right, a massive gust slamming its side. The wings shuddered violently. "We're in a microburst," yelled. Reacted instantly. "Full throttle, nose down 3 degrees. That'll overspeed us. It'll keep us flying." The engines roared as she pushed them beyond safe thrust levels. The jet fought back, groaning under the strain, but momentum steadied their path. Could feel the storm trying to tear them apart, but she'd faced worse. The same storm pattern had once nearly destroyed her career. She wasn't letting it win again. Lightning lit her face, sharp and determined. Her eyes reflected the control panel like twin mirrors. "Come on, baby," she whispered to the aircraft. "You've got this." The turbulence reached its peak. The plane jolted so hard, slammed into the console. The oxygen masks dropped in the cockpit now too, swaying wildly. Gritted her teeth, keeping her arms locked. Every alarm screamed. The aircraft descended through 14,000 feet. Altitude low, shouted. I know. Terrain proximity alert. Override it, she snapped. She turned, eyes fierce. Trust me. He hesitated, then silenced the alarm. At that moment, the clouds around them began to thin. Faint light appeared ahead the gap. There it is, cried. We're almost through. His focus narrowed to that bright sliver. She adjusted the pitch, easing power, keeping the wings level. The rain began to lessen. The thunder faded. Altitude 12,000, 11,900. Read off the numbers as the altimeter steadied. And then, with a violent jolt, they burst out of the storm. Sunlight exploded into the cockpit. The clouds fell away behind them like dark curtains pulling back from a stage. The plane leveled at 8,000 feet, engines humming steady again. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint, exhausted breathing of two pilots who had fought nature itself. Slumped back in his seat, his voice trembling. We made it. Didn't answer immediately. She stared out the windshield at the open sky, streaked with sunlight and calm air. Her hands were still trembling from adrenaline. Finally, she whispered, No, we survived. Making it comes next. Because ahead lay hundreds of miles of uncertain airspace and a plane running dangerously low on fuel. The sudden calm felt unreal. After an hour of chaos, silence filled the cockpit like a stranger, heavy, fragile, almost eerie. The sunlight was sharp, reflecting off the endless stretch of gray-blue clouds below them. Hands still trembled slightly on the controls, her knuckles pale from gripping too hard. Sat beside her, pale but breathing hard. His headset crackled faintly with static before air traffic finally broke through. Flight 828, radar contact reestablished. You dropped off our scope for 12 minutes. Status. Swallowed, clearing her throat. Control, this is Flight 828. We exited the storm cell. One engine unstable, captain incapacitated, fuel levels critical. Copy that, 828, the voice replied quickly. Recommend emergency diversion to Portland. You're 200 miles east. She glanced at the fuel gauge. The reading flickered red. We might not have 200 miles. Looked over, his voice barely above a whisper. We're down to our reserves. Engine 2's losing thrust. Shut down 2 manually, said. Better one good engine than 2 bad ones. He hesitated. If we shut it down, we'll be gliding half the way. She nodded, then we glide. Stared at her, exhausted, pale, but with newfound respect. He flicked the switch. Engine 2's roar faded, replaced by the low hum of wind. In the cabin, passengers were whispering prayers. A mother held her sleeping child close. A man gripped his wedding ring, muttering promises under his breath. The lead flight attendant, Kelly, knocked softly on the cockpit door. Captain Rhodes, she said through the intercom, people are scared. They're asking if we're going to make it. Press the button to respond. Kelly, tell them we've made it through the worst. We're heading for Portland. Keep everyone calm and make sure they stay seated. Her tone was even, but inside, her heart pounded with quiet dread. Exhaled, you think we'll really make it? Glanced at the horizon, where the faint outline of mountains shimmered in the distance. We didn't come this far to fall short now. Minutes passed like hours. Every instrument flicker made flinch. Every gust of wind felt like a warning. Adjusted the trim constantly, fighting to keep their altitude stable. Then a new alert flashed red on the panel. Fuel pressure low. His voice cracked. We're almost dry. Stayed calm. We'll stretch what's left, reduce throttle on 1. He obeyed, though the engine's hum dropped to a faint whine. Outside, the sky looked deceptively peaceful, golden streaks of sun over distant hills. His mind raced through contingencies, glide ratios, emergency fields, potential water landings. But she refused to voice any of them. Panic was contagious. Portland Control, she radioed again. Request priority emergency clearance. Estimated arrival in 15 minutes if fuel holds. Copy Flight 828. Runway 10R cleared. Emergency crews on standby. You're doing great, Captain. Smiled weakly. They finally called you Captain again. Smirked, eyes still on the sky. Let's earn it. At 10,000 feet, the remaining engine coughed. His hand flew to the throttle. We're losing pressure. His heart dropped. Feather the prop flow, keep the nose steady. The engine sputtered twice, then steadied barely. They were gliding now, descending gradually over rolling forest. The runway lights of Portland were still faint specks far ahead. Altitude 6,000, reported. Distance 40 miles. His jaw tightened. We'll make it. He looked at her, unsure if she was promising him or herself. Below, the cabin began to shake lightly, turbulence from lower air currents. The passengers gasped as the plane dipped again. Kelly's voice came through the intercom, breaking slightly. Captain, should we prepare for emergency landing? Hesitated. Not yet, I'll tell you when. Turned to her. If the engine cuts completely. She didn't let him finish. Then we glide her in by hand. The way she said it, calm, absolute, silenced him. For the next 10 minutes, the cockpit was a battlefield of silence and focus. Flew with small, deliberate movements, conserving every drop of fuel. The horizon grew clearer. The lights of Portland International sparkled like salvation. Altitude 4,000 said, We're close. Gear down in 2 minutes, replied. The fuel gauge dipped to 0. The engine sputtered again, weaker this time. Come on, she whispered to the plane, just a little further. When the first runway lights lined up dead ahead, his chest tightened. Relief and disbelief collided inside her. They were going to make it, barely, but enough. Exhaled, voice shaking, You did it. Didn't look away from the controls. We did it. But even as the city lights glimmered beneath them, one final challenge remained, bringing 200 terrified souls safely to the ground with an engine seconds from dying. And Rhodes, grounded no more, prepared for the hardest landing of her life. The city lights of Portland stretched beneath them, glittering like a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. The plane trembled through the final stretch of sky, one engine coughing, the other long dead. In the cockpit, every sound was amplified, the creak of metal, the whine of hydraulics, the rapid click of instruments warning that systems were shutting down one by one. His voice broke the silence. We're gliding on fumes, altitude 3,000 and falling fast. Gear down, she ordered. He hesitated. That'll increase drag. I know, she said sharply, but we'll need it ready. Do it. He pulled the lever. The landing gear groaned, unlocking with a deep mechanical thud. The plane jolted again, shaking from nose to tail. Radioed air traffic control. Portland Tower, Flight 828 on final approach, emergency status. 1 engine out, limited hydraulics, 200 souls aboard. Flight 828, you are clear to land on runway 10R, winds 10 knots from the west. Emergency crews are standing by. She exhaled, eyes locked forward. The runway lights blinked faintly through a thin veil of mist, a fragile path through the darkness. All right, she said quietly, this is it. He nodded, his face pale but steady. Let's bring them home. Inside the cabin, the flight attendants moved calmly, securing passengers. Kelly's voice came over the intercom, steady though her hands shook. Ladies and will be landing shortly. Please remain seated and brace for impact when instructed. We're in good hands. People held each other's hands. A man whispered a prayer. A child clutched his teddy bear. Every heart in that plane beat in unison, with fear, with hope, with trust in the woman up front. Flaps to 20, said. Flaps 20. Speed 180 knots. Speed steady. The numbers rolled through her mind like a rhythm, the rhythm of survival. The ground was rising fast, lights swelling brighter by the second. Altitude 2,000, reported. Good, keep the nose at 5 degrees pitch. Glanced at her, voice low. You've done this before, haven't you? Her jaw flexed. Once, in the simulator, never thought I'd need it for real. Then, without warning, the last engine sputtered. His hand froze on the throttle. We're losing power. The hum fell silent. The world went quiet. They were now a 100-ton glider slicing through the night sky. The plane was gliding silently now, a ghost over Portland's night sky. Every vibration had stopped. Even the roar of the engines was gone. All that remained was wind, a deep, eerie whisper rushing past the fuselage. His eyes flicked rapidly across the instruments. Airspeed 150 knots. Keep her nose steady. His breathing was shallow. Altitude 1,000, we're dropping fast. Flaps full, she ordered. He hesitated. Without thrust, that'll kill our lift. She gave him a steady look. We're out of lift anyway. We need drag control. Do it. He swallowed hard and moved the lever. The plane trembled again, the wings adjusting for the final descent. Ahead, the runway lights glowed like a silver thread through the darkness, so close, yet impossibly far. Took a slow breath. Brace for impact in 60 seconds. Keyed the intercom, his voice trembling but clear. Ladies, and this is your first officer. Please brace. Heads down, hands over your head. We are landing immediately. Inside the cabin, every sound vanished. 200 passengers bowed their heads in silence. Altitude 800 called. Keep her level, said, eyes locked on the windshield. We're almost there. The aircraft began to sink faster. The stall warning blared, a sharp, piercing alarm. Speed 140, shouted. Too low for power recovery, muttered. Pitch down, ease it. The nose dipped slightly. The lights of the runway expanded, rushing toward them. For a moment, everything slowed, the world narrowed to the strip of concrete beneath their wings. 500 feet. Steady. 300. Hold it, hold it. 200. His pulse thundered in her ears. Flare. The nose lifted. The wheels kissed the runway with a hard jolt, then bounced once, twice, the aircraft skidding violently as the hydraulics screamed. Sparks flew from the landing gear as the left tire burst. Deploy spoilers, shouted. Manual only, yelled back. She grabbed the emergency lever and yanked it down. Panels on the wings flipped open, catching air, slowing the jet. The plane veered slightly right. She corrected with all her strength. The yoke fought her like a living beast, but she didn't let go. The runway lights streaked past in a blur. The cabin shook violently. Passengers screamed, then went silent as the plane began to slow. Speed 120, cried. Keep braking. 100. Almost there. 70. Come on, come on. The final jolt came with a screech of metal and smoke. The aircraft lurched forward, then stopped, completely still. For a long moment, no one moved, no one breathed. Then exhaled, hands shaking on the yoke. Engines off, fuel closed, systems safe. Stared at her, eyes wide. We made it. Gave a weak, tired smile. We didn't crash, that's a win. Outside, the glow of emergency vehicles began to surround the plane. Red and white lights reflected off the windows like pulsing stars. Flight 828, this is Portland Tower, the radio crackled. Welcome back to Earth. Leaned back in her seat, letting out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Glad to be here. The cabin door opened minutes later. Paramedics rushed in, checking passengers. Kelly emerged from the aisle, tears in her eyes. Captain Rhodes, they're all okay, every single one. His throat tightened. Good. Turned to her. You realize you just landed a powerless jet. That's impossible. She shook her head softly. No, just improbable. He smiled faintly. They're going to talk about this forever. Stared through the windshield, watching the dawn break over the mountains. Let them. Maybe this time they'll remember what it means to trust a pilot, even one who was grounded. Hours later, as investigators arrived and passengers embraced loved ones on the tarmac, stood apart from the crowd, her uniform torn, her hair disheveled. A senior FAA officer approached quietly. "Captain Rhodes," he said, "3 years ago we grounded you for flying too aggressively. Today that same recklessness saved 200 lives." Looked down at her hands, still trembling slightly. "It wasn't recklessness," she said softly. "It was instinct and belief." The officer nodded. "Whatever it was, welcome back, Captain." As the sun climbed over Portland's skyline, painting the clouds gold, took one last look at the aircraft, smoking, but whole. She smiled faintly. "You did good, girl," she whispered to the plane. And for the first time in years, Rhodes, the pilot once grounded for flying too boldly, felt her heart lift higher than any altitude she'd ever reached.